Hello, my name is Will Hall. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Rain and a professor of design and technology at NYU. And it seems to me that essentially every third article that's written these days has something to do with the rise of the machines. I travel all the time, and I'm sure like a lot of you do, and I feel like every airport I go to, I'm sort of greeted by this wall of magazines with dead-eyed robots staring back at me on the covers. And it's funny, I think most of these articles are trying to predict what's now and next, and everybody's making bold predictions. But from my perspective, if you want to know where big tech is going, you don't need to read a magazine, you just need to look to China. The work that I do at NYU looks at the comparative adoption of technology across different societies and the effects they have. And it's abundantly clear that if you take an emerging principle, you see how it's being applied in China because of the scale and rapid adoption of these technologies. For the last 20 years, it's given us a reasonable and reliable roadmap that I think we can learn from today. Said plainly, I see China as a bit of a distorted crystal ball. And I think the word distorted is really important. Quite obviously, I'm not saying that China is the same as the United States, is the same as Europe, etc. That being said, there are principles that I see looking into that distorted crystal ball that I think apply to all of us right now today that you can learn from and apply right now. I have 10 minutes so I can share one of these principles with you, but I think it's probably the most important as it pertains to voice, and it's that systems win. I love the history of the internet. And one of my favorite characters in the history of the internet is this guy. His name is the Cloner. He very famously stole multiple sort of Silicon Valley startups back in the day. So for example, he took Reddit and he took it to China. He took YouTube and he took it to China. He took Facebook and he took it to China and he copied it so completely, in fact, if you look in the footer, it said this is a Mark Zuckerberg production. I mean, this guy is just shameless. And he also stole, let's call it Yelp, with this parody product called Dianping. As you might imagine, our friends at Yelp didn't exactly take too kindly to this. This was the early 2000s. But at the same time, there's always a little bit of Silicon Valley hubris, where they're like, well, okay, fine, but who can do Yelp better than Yelp? We're Yelp. We'll simply go to China, we'll beat them at our own game, we're Yelp. Fair enough, but the one thing they didn't really account for is this principle within Chinese entrepreneurship that I personally become obsessed with, and it's called go heavy. I love this idea, and it works like this. So on day one, both Yelp and Dianping had essentially the same platform. It was a website and app that did ratings and reviews and the things you would sort of expect. So Yelp said, okay, we've replicated Yelp in China. I think we're done here. But go heavy never stops. They then said, well, look, if people are looking for ratings and reviews, they probably want to order food. So then they built out their entire payment platform. They worked with restaurants and built in payments and sort of infrastructure within the restaurants. They also incentivized them to be on the platform. And when they went and did that, they went a little bit further and they started to look at what the data was saying. And they realized that if we can't get food to people, in 20 minutes or less, they won't use our platform. So Go Heavy says, well, let's build a fleet of smart scooters. They built out tens of thousands of smart scooters zipping all around Beijing. I mean, think about what would go into this. The manpower, the training, the everything, right? And then they went a little bit further. And then they put data sensors within each of these. And out of that, they started to get some of the most robust traffic pattern data really all in China. They went so far, in fact, to go to petition the Chinese government to say, we need food lanes for our food trucks. Do you hear what I'm saying? They're reorienting the entire infrastructure of Beijing around a food app. This is absurd, and this is not what normal people do. It's funny because Yelp thought they were fighting a man. I would contend they were not fighting a man, but rather a straight-up beast. This guy is shameless. There's no way you can compete with this, and quite obviously, and not surprisingly, Yelp lost, and they lost pretty quickly and pretty badly. I love this exit quote from Jeremy Stoppelman, their CEO. He said, the exit from China because they sold to Grubhub allowed us to do what we do best, build the Yelp app, that thing in the upper left-hand corner. I don't want payment systems. I don't want to make smart scooters. I'm sure not trying to reorient the infrastructure of China. No, thank you, we're out. But if you're being really generous, you maybe could say that Yelp is worth $1 billion. I really don't understand that evaluation. They're essentially a parodied feature set at this point. I'm not buying any Yelp stock. Conversely, though, Dianping has a pre-IPO evaluation of $55.5 billion. They're a unicorn times that. I mean, it's made them intensely resilient and I think infinitely more valuable. And you see this in our tech as well. I mean, Amazon, one of our sponsors, is there a more go-heavy company than they're vertically integrating, expanding horizontally? I can't tell you throughout my career how many streaming video RFPs I've received through the years. But what was at once a commodity, i.e. a streaming video, Go Heavy says we're going to build our own Hollywood, right? And that's essentially what Netflix has done. And as a result, really hard to copy them, really hard to compete with them. Go Heavy builds moats that are really profound. And when we share these ideas with brands, very often like, well, yeah, okay, well, that's how Silicon Valley works, but we sell cat food or whatever you do. But we believe that every business or every company, regardless of your industry, is a tech company in disguise, whether you realize it or believe it or not. I believe that's a fact. And the fact of the matter is tech companies don't sell cat food, they build systems. It's all about systems. And when I tell people that I work in voice, inevitably these are the images that come to mind. These smart speakers, and sure, we love smart speakers. We at Rain, in fact, work with 23 of the Fortune 100 brands. We made one of the very first skills and actions on the platform. Yeah, we're with you. 150 million things, lovely. These speakers are a rounding error on the larger world of voice. If you've ever heard me talk about voice before, you've probably seen the following slide because I believe it's probably the most important. And it is that to win at voice, you have to think in systems. To win at voice, you have to think in ecosystems. It's not just about the speakers, but it's about how everything works with everything else. Voice without an ecosystem is like a keyboard without a computer in some ways, because voice directly affects your mobile and your e-com and anywhere where you transact, as well as your website, your SEO, your SEM, your content, as well, yeah, of course, those 150 million some odd speakers that are in market today, as well as any physical locations all working together as one cohesive mesh. A lot of brands go off the rails right here because they don't think in systems. We've looked at the hype of voice, we've thrown out a halfway considered skill that sits in isolation, and then we say, well, voice doesn't work, I'm on to the next shiny object. But when you innovate in systems, you can start to deliver on the promise that voice has had from day one. An example I'll give you just to illustrate the point would be the work that we've done with Starbucks. With them, we have a best-in-class applications. We have more payments transacted through that app than all of Apple Pay. It's kind of astonishing how many people order a coffee through that app. Not surprisingly, the very first thing we created was an NLP, so that if you order something like a triple grande macchiato in a venti cup, which I would never do because I'm not a pretentious asshole, but if I did, it would understand what I meant, would reconcile that order to me and my location and my account. Building out that reconciliation layer. That sommelier, as was mentioned earlier, where I can just say what I want, it gives me what I need. Yeah, please, more of that. And because of that, it then allowed us to be very well postured to be in those speakers on day one. So not surprisingly, that made a lot of sense. You're on your way out to work, you order your regular, you skip the line, you get in your car, you skip the line and go, obviously. But then we started to work within their physical locations, reconciling data sets. I don't have time to get into it. Happy to later if you'd like. But because of the system approach, that's allowed us to do innovation in really meaningful and obvious ways. The car, right? The car makes a ton of sense. You're on your way to work, you freeform order your pretentious triple grande macchiato in a venti cup, which pays for it in the app in my pocket. When I'm 7 minutes away, it sends the order, I skip the line, I grab my coffee, and I go. It's system with a side of system. You remove part of this equation, it fails and it fails completely. And as a result, it's made something that should be really easily commodified very hard to copy. Just like Dion Ping built resilience through systems, so is Starbucks. We can't just go and start a coffee company and compete because they're a software company that happens to sell coffee. But this system approach is true of really almost every altitude of sort of application. I'll give you the example of the work that we've recently done with Nike. For those of you who saw Back to the Future, this is the Nike Adapt BB. It's that self-lacing shoe in Back to the Future. It's that shoe's great-great-grandson. And we helped launch this live through a telecast of the Lakers-Celtics game on TNT a couple months ago. So all throughout the game, we were having the assistant being cued by what was happening in live TV, augmenting in real time. You could ask the assistant right there in your home, hey, what's Kuzma, one of the players, wearing? What does Nike think the future of basketball is, et cetera? We got tremendous sort of second screen or second voice participation with that. Real-time assistantship. And then at sort of halftime, Charles Barkley, you should look at this on YouTube. It's actually hilarious. They lowered the shoe very overly dramatically into Charles Barkley's hand. And then he showed how it worked. And then you could order it right there through voice. Said, do you want to buy this? Just, hey, Google, ask Nike. Put these in my cart. So the right shoe and the right media with the right utterance fulfilled through sort of fulfillment app sneakers. If you remove one part of this, it doesn't work. But together, it became really profound. We were able to sell out our entire inventory in under 30 seconds. I'm going to repeat that. We sold out everything they had in under a minute. Everybody here talks about how frictionless voice can be. Totally agreed. Everybody says, well, gosh, there's going to be $40.2 billion transacted through voice. Totally agreed. But the way you do that is through system thinking. I'll leave you with this. Ladies, fellas, people, the reason I'm showing you this, everybody wants to look like a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to go to the gym. Like, I look the way I do because I don't do what he does. I don't eat what he eats. I don't work out like he works, and he looks like that, and I look like this. I've met with hundreds of brands over the past few years around voice. Everybody's first question is, how do I sell stuff? I want to sell my widget. Yeah, me too. But the way you do that is system thinking, that physique digitally and thinking in interconnected ways. So that's really my time. I mean, I don't have time to get into any of the rest of these, but I do think that system wins is one of those principles that I've seen in that distorted crystal ball that is China, that principle transcends regionality and everything else, and it's how we've seen success in this space as well. If you want to learn about any more of these, we actually have worksheets that we're happy to send you. You can shoot us a note. We'll send it to you for free if you'd like to. Thank you so much.